I think that Nansen is the one that has meant the most for me and my own expedition. I wanted to follow in Nansen's footsteps. And I always wanted to see for myself what is behind the horizon. I always had that drive in me. To cross these areas is almost impossible, really, and I can't understand how Nansen managed to do that. I knew I could do it physically, but mentally, was I strong enough? Thank you all for coming here. Great to see so many found their way here to listen to my stories, which today will be mainly about my expedition to Franz Josef Land and also the circumnavigation of the Arctic, which we did a couple of years ago. We have, of course, these two great explorers, Roald Amundsen and it's Fridtjof Nansen. And of these two, there is no doubt who was the greatest polar explorer. That was obviously Roald Amundsen, because he was the first man to reach the South Pole, 14th of December, 1911. But of these two, for me personally, I think that Nansen is the one that has meant the most for me and my own expedition. He believed that there was a current moving across the Arctic Ocean, and to prove that, he set off to do the drift himself with this ship, the Fram. And the Fram is a wooden ship, but it was constructed in such a way that it would be lifted up instead of being crushed by the ice, as so many ships before had done, with often fatal consequences. So obviously many people thought that this was mere suicide, but Nansen, he was not a man who hesitated, and in 1893 he put his plan into life. They realized when they were about halfway that they were not going to drift across the North Pole itself, and in those days the North Pole was unconquered. And when you have a ship up there full of provisions, that is a chance not to be missed. So Nansen, what does he do? He takes his companion, Hjalmar Hansen, and leave Fram in an attempt to reach the North Pole. And that is, of course, a great plan. But the backside of that plan is that when you leave a ship up there in the Arctic Ocean in the end of the 1800s, you will never find that ship again. So these two guys, they had to manage by themselves with just what they could bring with them, all the way from up there and back to civilization. And after about 5 months in the pack ice, they didn't quite reach the North Pole. They came a bit on the way, but then they had to turn back to scramble onto land somehow. And after 5 months in the pack ice, they reached the unexplored northern parts of Franz Josef Land, which is this group of islands here just east of Spitsbergen, Russian territory. They came up here, and it was already August. Winter was setting in. And they dug into the ground and miraculously survived that winter. And this is one of Nansen's own pictures from the wintering on Jackson Island on Franz Josef Land. That's his winter hut right there. And the next spring, they continued onward. And just by chance, really, they met an English expedition on Cape Flora, led by Frederick Jackson. And this, I strongly believe, saved Nansen's life. And they were able to join his ship back to Norway. Now, Nansen, the trip he did with Fram was obviously a great accomplishment, a great plan, but the trip that Nansen and Johansen did through Franz Josef Land, I really think is the greatest expedition that has been done in Arctic exploration. And I really wanted to follow in their footsteps, to see what they saw, experience the same nature and the hardship. And Agnar Berg and me had already talked about doing a trip through Franz Josef Land. So we teamed up, and in 1993, we were able to get permission from the Russian authorities to do an expedition up there. So we chartered a helicopter and flew all the way up to Nansen's wintering camp at Franz Josef Land. And Nansen, he described this as an oasis of the Arctic. And I think he must be a very positive guy, because I have never been a place so barren and desolated as this, really. We were actually 3 on this trip. Agnar, and also this huge Greenland dog, Sarek. So he could pull his own sled, and he also doubled as a polar bear guard at night, since he had to sleep outside of the tent. After about a week into the trip, we encountered a heavy storm up there. Nothing that we couldn't handle, but we got a little bit frozen and tired, and Sarek was not feeling as strong as he maybe should have. And on the way, we knew that there were an abandoned polar station, military station. And we thought, okay, maybe we can pop by, find a house, lit a fire and dry up a bit. So we decided to do that. And before we left Russia, everyone we met said that this station is abandoned, there is no people there. But when we came there, we saw people, not only a few, there was a whole community living there. And we were, after a few formalities, which is normal when you enter one of the most secret bases of the North, we were very welcomed and could dry up a bit and also loosen up a bit there. We, actually, one of the officers had a birthday party, so we were dancing along in our big ski boots and having great fun. And of course, Sarek, he was everyone's favorite pet, and I think he found his twin soul in this guy. So we had a great time on this base, but if there was one thing I was to complain about, it was the toilet facilities. That's ladies' rooms to the left there and men's rooms to the right, and I'm glad I was not there when spring came. Finally, we had, of course, to keep on going. Spring was coming, and coming to Alexandra Island, which really is the last island before that open stretch between Spitsbergen and Franz Josef Land begins, we entered really impenetrable pack ice. And what has happened here is that strong wind has pushed the ice up against the land, just broken everything. And then the wind had shifted and flushed out of the remaining ice, so there were really not many places to stay. And what happened next is that the ice floe we camped at loosened from land. It detached itself from land, and in 24 hours we drifted 40 kilometers south into the Barents Sea, where all ice eventually will melt. And we tried to find a safe place to camp on. We were now 3 weeks into the trip, but from here everything started to deteriorate around us. And this is just a few moments later. So this trip, it was a great trip. But it ended with a rescue helicopter from Svalbard, and I can't help feeling that it was 1-0 to Franz Josef Land, and I wanted revenge. I wanted to get back there and to complete this journey and to follow in Nansen's footsteps. That's what I wanted to do. And it actually took 14 years before I was back in 2007. Together with this guy, Thomas Ulrich. And this time we wanted to do this trip in full. That meant to do the whole Nansen and Johansen journey. So we started at the North Pole, 1st of May 2007, and skied south. And that meant that we had to cross more than 1,000 kilometers of drifting ice just before we reached land. So this was a huge undertaking. And as you know, ice conditions has really changed up there since the early days when I did my first expeditions. It's thinner ice, it breaks up more frequently, and it also becomes more open water. But the closer we came to land, the worse conditions, and some places they were absolutely not possible neither to ski or to paddle. Then we just had to fight our way through really, really heavy and dense pack ice which were moving around. And what happens when you have this slush ice and you're obviously we skied towards the summer, it doesn't freeze anymore. It gets crushed by the ice, by the powers of the ice, and then it just stays open. And to cross these areas like this is almost impossible, really. And I can't understand how Nansen and Johansen managed to do that. I had great respect for their wintering, but what they achieved up there, that's really amazing. Without a swimsuit, with just wooden skis and kayak made of canvas, that they managed to get through these areas is really something special. After about 1.5 months, we finally saw land. And when you've been away for a long time on the pack ice, That's a great moment, and really magical moment with lots of feelings.
Det må være vann, altså. Jeg er skikkelig nervøs, altså.
Det som jeg trodde var en sky, det er land. Det er første gang siden Nansen og Johansen så dette her, at noen har sett det fra denne posisjonen. Dette er hva de så i 1895. Eva-livet, ja. Der! Det er helt utrolig. Vi ser land.
So when finally we came to the ice edge, you know, the ice just stopped and it was just water. But then we could transform over kayaks. We skied and also paddled from one island to the other. We were in the middle of June now, so everything was melting around us, but it was also much more wildlife than you have in the winter. So the sky was just filled with birds like mosquitoes breeding on every cliff we went by, and also, of course, lots of polar bears. And we met about 40 of them on this expedition. And when you meet a polar bear out skiing, that's fine, because you see them at a distance normally, and you have time to sort out who is the boss. But when you're in your tiny little tent trying to sleep, that's not always so easy with just this thin fabric between yourself and those padded footsteps outside. And Thomas, he's a snorer. He snores quite a lot, but that is not enough to scare away a polar bear. So it happened sometimes when we opened the zipper in the morning and there was just this big white piece of fur standing outside. To paddle in single kayaks is obviously faster, but you're also much more exposed. You can capsize, something can happen, we might be far apart from each other, and you're also more vulnerable for these guys, the walrus. Not when they're on land and relaxing, they're not dangerous on land, but when you meet them in the water, it can be dangerous. And Nansen, he had several walrus attacks. One time he got a tusk straight through his kayak, and when you enter into his territory, he is actually likely to attack you. And that's actually one of the main reasons why we preferred paddling together. In the beginning of July, we came to Nansen and Johansen's wintering place at Cape Norvegia, which is called now on Jackson Island. And it was summer, so we could see a little bit of what was there. And when they came here in the fall, 1895, they were out of food. They had no fuel left for the stove. And they dug down in the ground and they made walls of stone, and they found this piece of wood on the beach which they put animal skins across to make a roof. And during that autumn they hunted, of course, to get food for the winter. And during that winter they ate 19 polar bears. And those bones I hold in my hands is actually bones that these guys chewed on during that winter, and that they managed to survive that wintering. It's really amazing, but then again, they wanted to survive. That they wanted to get back home. There was no question about it. And in the end of the day, it's these qualities, this willpower, which is needed to go through such an ordeal like this. So we continued, we followed the whole of Nansen's route all the way down to Cape Flora, where we could pull our kayaks up on the beach and settle down, make camp, wait for the sailboat that was going to pick us up. Now, as you all know, waiting time can be a little bit boring sometimes, but then again, when you've been on an expedition for 3 months with just your expedition partner, you don't really need a lot to have fun. You just make the best out of it. So we were camped there, and we didn't have too much in reserve. And then we got the message that the boat was delayed, not just 1 week, but 2 weeks delayed, and we got hungrier and hungrier. And you know you're hungry when you get water in your mouth seeing a polar bear. But then again, Fridtjof Land is just full of surprises.
Ja, Børge, hva skjer?
Ja, det århundrets overraskelse. Plutselig så var det en svær båt her ute. Speak English? Where are you from? Norway.
Hei, hei.
Donkey. Up here on expedition.
Hello.
You have the documents.
Hello.
Så kom verden til oss da, litt tidligere enn ventet. Og nå suser det rundt med masse turister her.
That's good.
So,
And where are you from?
who are you?
Hello there.
Hello.
I'm Gretchen. This is Bob. We're from Los Angeles.
What are you doing here?
We've come to see you.
Did you know that you're the first people we've seen in 3 months? You're kidding.
Our expedition is finished here.
Where did you start from?
We are a bit earlier than we
North Pole.
We have to wait another week.
Yeah. And in your kite?
Не потеряй веру в тумане, да и себя не потеряй.
Så vi har hatt.
Кто понимает?
So that really saved the day for us. But the best day was still to come, and that was 13th of August. Finally, we saw sail in the horizon, and this is actually a friend of mine, Thorleifsson, who sailed his own private sailboat from Oslo all the way to the northern parts of Norway, across the Barents Sea to Fridtjof Land to pick us up. Isn't it great to have such friends? It's amazing. And this is also really the best moment on the whole expedition, I think.
Hei!
Ikke gå for langt inn! Det er grunn!
And then we sailed across the Barents Sea again, back to the northern parts of Norway, where I got on my bicycle and cycled home to Oslo. Now, after I managed to bike myself home to Oslo, I had a look on the satellite maps of these areas we just have been through. And that is when I saw that both the northeast and northwest passage was open at the same time. And that is also when I got the idea that it might be possible to sail around the whole Arctic in one season. And this was obviously due to global warming, and I measured the ice thickness up there since the early 90s for the Norwegian Polar Institute. And what we wanted to do with this expedition was to show with a visual example of what is happening with the polar ice caps. So we started to plan a trip around the Arctic, and with me I asked Thorleifsson, who picked us up on Fridtjof Land, to join, and we planned this trip together. As a crew, we had a young Frenchman called Vincent Colliard, and also as a crew we had my Russian friend Stanislav Kostyaskin. And 28th of July, we set sail out of the Murmansk fjord and into the Barents Sea.
A little bit rough. Yeah, so it's very shallow.
I'm trying to stabilize myself in a not stabilized boat, jumping over 4 meters high waves.
We met the first heavy pack ice outside Taimyr, but nothing compared to what you can read about in the history books. And actually one of the biggest problems we had was fog. Because we had so much open water, it became foggy. And even if we knew that there were passages through these ice fields, we sometimes got stuck and had to retreat. So we had storms, we had all kinds of weather, of course, but through this enormously long Siberian coast, which just stretched out forever, we had also frequently very, very calm weather with almost no winds. And in these conditions, the Northern Passage really could show her potentials in full.
2 o'clock at night, 16th of August, north of Taimyr, Laptev Sea.
Bueno.
God knows where it comes from. We got it.
It's a big one.
Now, people usually think about the ice as something barren and desolated with not much life at all, but actually it's the opposite. Whenever we had ice, it was teeming with wildlife. When there was no ice, there was no wildlife at all. So the drift ice, the pack ice of the Arctic Ocean is really the big engine in the food chain up there. And the pack ice actually acts as an upside down bottom. Underneath the ice, it's algae growing, which is again are food for shrimps and smaller animals, which is food for bigger animals like fish and seals and birds and of course whales and polar bears and so on. And polar bears obviously has become the symbol of what's happening up there in the Arctic, but it affects the whole food chain from all animals. And even if a polar bear can swim long distances, which he obviously can do, he will eventually need ice to move on, he will need ice to catch seals on, he will need ice to breed his young one on. So the changes of the Arctic is just happening too fast for these animals to adapt. 5th of September, Point Barrow, and this is where we were going to have a crew change. So Stanislav was going ashore and flew back to Moscow, and on the beach we had Vincent, who was eager and ready to get on board. And now it was the Northwest Passage, obviously sailing and zigzagging through quite difficult conditions actually, because there is so much more narrow channels up there than in the east. And this is an area where of course, it was a challenge to sail in broad daylight. And in September, we had longer and longer nights, and we had to sail 24 hours should we be able to complete this expedition before we froze there inside the ice. And we had to stand on deck with the hand torch searching for ice, and that was, I think, the most heroizing thing we did on this expedition. Finally, 25th of September, we came to Pond Inlet and had completed both passages. Still, there were now 5,000 kilometers to go back to Norway. And that was the goal, to complete the whole circle. And that meant sailing through some of the roughest waters in the Northern Hemisphere, the Baffin Bay and the North Atlantic.
Big waves just outside Greenland, and they're directly from behind. So we're surfing along, and we have to be careful so we don't capsize.
We were now in October, so the stormy season had already begun, but we managed to push through, and finally 23rd of October we came sailing into our own home fjord, the Oslo Fjord, and it was a fantastic homecoming with lots of people meeting us at the dock. And actually also Fram, Nansen's ship, was back there in the corner, and also Amundsen's ship, the Geo, it's this one, first to sail the Northwest Passage. So we actually felt a kind of a nod of accomplishment from these two giants. But I often get the question, why? Why do you do it? All these hard trips, all this suffering, all the long time away from home and so on. And yes, I have to admit, it is hard sometimes, especially when you're fighting the cold or the pack ice. Or maybe the worst thing is waking up in the morning after a nice dream and you find yourself in the middle of the Arctic Ocean with 1,000 kilometers to go. That is not always so nice. And it's easy to feel sorry for yourself, which I sometimes do. But then again, to be out there on all these expeditions and also shorter trips out in the nature, you relate to the surroundings in a totally different way. You're present in your own life in a different way, I feel. And I think one of the secrets why I'm been able to cope with the struggle, I think that is really the ability to lift my head, to stop, to lift my head and look around me, and to see that I'm actually moving through an art exhibition every day. But you have to lift your head to see it. So I guess then you can understand that this is my life, really, and there is not just one answer to the big question. I think a good answer is because I'm having fun out there. I like it. And another answer is that I want to share and share these experiences with you guys. So thank you so much for coming.